Hi, welcome to the China-MENA newsletter. I'm Jonathan Fulton. This week, I'm going to be talking a lot about Iran with different academics who are working on China-Iran relations. And I'm really happy today to have with me a PhD student, Niloufar Bagheria, who is an Iranian PhD candidate at Australian National University. Niloufar, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so happy and it's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Oh, of course. So, the reason why I want to talk to you, you wrote an excellent article that was published earlier this year for Asian Affairs. The article is called China's Marginal Involvement in the 2023 Iran-Saudi Arabia Reconciliation. This is a
Mhm.
topic that so many people are thinking about, discussing, writing about, and I frequently think people get it wrong. And when I saw this article come out, I was really happy because I think you get it right. And I think it's a really, really good article. It's very useful. I think people in the policy community should read it. I'll post a link on the page. But what brought you to this topic? Why did you choose to write this?
Thanks so much for having me again. And thank you so much for introducing me and also my article to your audience. I was watching one video and I saw you were talking about my article, and I'm so grateful for that. For choosing this topic, actually, it wasn't planned. You already know that I work on Iran-China's relationship. So it's been when I started reading on Iran-China's relationship, it took me to the situation that okay, I realized there are a lot people are talking about Iran-China, and somehow I found it a little frustrating, and I felt like it's more of like repetition, and that's why I said, okay, there is much more going on. There is definitely more than this, considering Iran-China's relationship. So that's how I started my PhD and my contribution in my thesis. But you also know that when you read about Iran China, you also come across with the huge literature on China's increasing engagement with the region. So I was thinking about this. Maybe I could work on this topic as well, maybe after my PhD. And also, I got this question a lot from students here when I teach. Students ask a lot about is China going to be the peacemaker in the region? Is China actually has the ability to do that instead of like the US, for example? And if um, especially with considering the US diminishing presence in the Middle East, if China is actually growing its presence and engagement with the region, and if it's going to be more cooperative or maybe even more disputed. So we always have very good discussion on this because I work on China-Iran's relationship. But how I got actually to write this topic, it was with the support of Asian Affairs. They asked me to work on this topic, and because I was already working on it, and I said, okay, that's a great opportunity. Let's work on it, and that's how I published this article. And thank you so much for you and also the support of Asian Affairs Journal.
Sure. So I think when this it was very dramatic. I remember very clearly because I was just about to get on a plane to fly to Montreal for the International Studies Association conference in March 2023. And my phone just lit up and everybody was talking about this dramatic event that just happened in Beijing, where China had brought the Saudis and the Iranians together and facilitated this rapprochement. And I think a lot of the early assessments were this was a signal that China has a greater capacity to shape events in the Middle East, um, that it's able to provide a lot of leverage to the Iranian government, that China's been developing a lot of political capital over 20 plus years as it's become a very big economic actor, and now it's willing to spend some of this political capital. Um, I thought that really kind of exaggerated China's role
Mhm.
in what happened here. And I thought your article does a really good job of showing the domestic pressures in Saudi and in Iran and how that
Mhm.
was driving events. So can you tell us a little bit about what your findings were?
Yeah, thank you so much for I'm so happy that you found it interesting. Well, when scholars started talking about this, I also felt like it's a little exaggerating. It's not like that when people talk about Iran-China's relationship, sometimes it can be really scholars talk about, like, for example, Iran and China's relationship can make changes in the region, in like the order of the region and international level, maybe. I really find this very like too much. And that's why I started thinking about it clearly. And because I've also lived in Iran for 30 years, and I know that the Iranian society, the country, the regime in Iran. So I said, this can't be this. And there are definitely more reasons behind this reconciliation. So before I talk about the findings, I want to add something that I haven't written in my article, but actually it doesn't disagree. It actually agrees with what I'm saying in my article. Um, so recently I got a book from Iran, and it's written in Persian, and it's from Jawad Zarif, the foreign minister for Hassan Rouhani. So it's in Persian, and I've been reading this book for my own research, and I found some interesting information, and I said maybe here is the best platform maybe to share it, because I didn't have the chance to write it in my article. So what actually this shows, the timeline shows that I've written in my article that it started in 2019, but actually it shows that Jawad Zarif, the foreign minister at that time, they started the first steps when they took office, even before the JCPOA started. So it's very important, because why the reason why they did this also is written in the book, and he argues that uh, the first reason is because we needed low tension region for our interests, and also we wanted to start it as the bigger country. But the second one, which is very important, I think, is the regime's understanding of Iran's image at both regional and also international um, level. What is important was to improve this image, which wasn't that good during Ahmadinejad, the president before. So what they did, they focused on desecuritizing Iran's image, Iran's situation, and that was the priority for the regime. So and the reason why he mentions in another part of the book, he mentions the reason why this is important, because when the US attacked Iraq, actually it was the situation was exactly like this, and there was like a global consensus, security consensus, on considering Iraq as a threat. So that's how we considered this improving this image and getting rid of all this threatening image of Iran, because we didn't want to be the next target of being easily attacked by another country. So it's like when this happened to Iraq, it was easier how to say, it was like easier to confront, like to attack this country, because everyone, even countries like China or Russia, they couldn't say anything because there was a consensus. So we wanted to break this consensus, and it shows the reason why they started this reconciliation with Saudi Arabia even before JCPOA. But for the major concerns of these two countries, I should say I don't work on Saudi Arabia, but so what I found that was mostly based on Persian or English sources. So I didn't have access to Arabic, and maybe there is something else there. But what I saw from this Saudi Arabia's motivation to have this reconciliation with Iran is because the first one and most important one is Saudis being disappointed from the US support. Uh, there was a time that before Islamic Revolution in Iran, that that both Saudis and Iranians were the uh, security guarantor of the region. But there was also the time that Nixon change this to one single unofficial pillar. That's how Zarif argues that Saudi Arabia never forget this, and they never forget because they are using every situation, every event to keep this balance, and to even to change it against Iranian interests. Well, there are so many reasons behind this. I'm just saying that Zarif because he says this. Definitely, there are many other reasons behind the ups and downs in Iran's and Saudi's relationship. But this is very important because he's talking about the cause and how we can improve this relationship. And so the second one is the first one was actually the US being disappointed by the US. But the second one is, which I think is also important, is Saudi's, the, how to say, the emergency and need for peace in the region for their initiatives. Maybe this can also be another reason, but I think, in my opinion, the first one, Saudi is being disappointed from the US support, and especially after Obama, for example, shifting toward Asia. And also, this is also very important that when after JCPOA and also during normalization with the West, Barack Obama asked both Saudi Arabia and Iran to work on the relationship together. Now you should accept Iran as the partner and to reconcile relationship yourself. This also happened during Donald Trump presidency, so it wasn't just about Barack Obama. So it seems a little disappointment from the U.S. support in Saudi Arabia.
Sure, but I
But
mean,
for
one of the
Iran,
if I could just jump in though here, I mean, this actually happened during the Raisi and Biden respective
mhm,
administrations. So,
yeah,
I mean, the background you've given is really helpful, but I think you can see like during the Raisi period is when we saw the Iranians really make the commitment to do this, and you saw
mhm,
the same situation when Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince in Saudi, seemed also really committed. One of the things I think that you did really good in the paper was just focusing on the domestic pressures that were happening in Saudi and Iran, just
mhm,
leading up to that immediate period where we saw
mhm,
this reconciliation happen in Beijing. So when you talked about the pressures in Saudi, you wrote a lot about what you just mentioned, the need for stability and development for the Saudi Vision 2030,
mhm,
which I think is a really also very important factor, you
yeah,
know,
mhm,
because obviously there's a sense that that Iran has leverage over the Houthis, and the Houthis were
mhm,
very disruptive for the Saudis. So I thought
mhm.
you did a great job in the article of pointing out that consideration for the Saudis. Um, what were the Iranians hoping to get from a better relationship with Saudi at that moment in time, leading up to the rapprochement?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Iran had actually definitely its own motivations, and I think that was the main cause, that the main reason behind this reconciliation. For Iran, Iran was actually under one of the most difficult times after Islamic Republic, after the Iran-Iraq war, not just from the international and regional pressure, but also from inside. And Iran was under a huge legitimacy crisis.
Mm.
And that was one of the main reasons I think that pushed Iran to say that, okay, we have the international and regional support. And they wanted to show this positive image of themselves in a very difficult situation in Iran. Still, I remember how terrible the situation was inside with this domestic crisis. But also, yeah, and also other factors that I think were also important was I've mentioned this in my article, and also I talked about this in Qatar. It didn't get a lot of attention, but I think it's very important. I talked about China's increasing relationship with Saudi Arabia, and Iran is not happy with it. Iran has shown concerns about this, and when I talked about this, it didn't get lots of attention, but I think it's very important. I talked about one a very important discussion between Iraqi officials in Iran that they shared when they were outside Iran, that Iranians are worried and is like somehow concerned with the increasing relationship between China and Saudi Arabia. And I think that was very important. So when I was reading the book from Zarif, because it's a new book, and he also totally approves this, and he says um, Iran was relatively losing its largest and most pivotal partner. So this is exact translation, and I'm just using his words. And he states that China clearly took a stance against Iran and aligned itself with Saudi Arabia. And he also adds that President Xi Jinping not only supported the GCC's position on Iranian islands, but also in remarks that received less attention, which is very important, I think, that referred to Saudi Arabia as one of the pillars of the future global order. So that's what I talked about this in my presentation in Qatar, saying that this Iran is really worried about losing the only partner, the only friendly country, relatively friendly country to Saudi Arabia. And that's how they came to this realization that this is like emergency and we need to start reconciliation and working on this with not just Saudi Arabia, but also a more like kind of shift toward China. So I think both of these external and internal pressure at the same time, which was very important and difficult time for Iran, made this reconciliation so much easier. And it was just mostly because of these two sides and not China. Well, I'm not saying China was not important, but the way that scholars always talk about it, China was the most important one, and it was because of China's leverage on Iran. But I don't see that, and you have seen so many examples that Iran has been considering its own interests, and also inside Iran they know about China's intentions. They talk about it. You can always see that there are so many newspapers talking about China's not being friendly, and the only method they've been using is just denial. They just try to deny that China is behaving this way, if China is going more and more towards Arab countries in the region. But what I can see is just exaggeration by scholars outside. Yeah, I think they neglect actually what is happening inside the country, what happened that time, and also what is happening in the region.
I
So
think
I hope
that's
I
a
answered your question.
yeah, no, I think it's a really important point because I think for people watching from outside the region,
Mhm,
you'll see a very dramatic event that was unusual that
mhm,
foreign ministers from Saudi and Iran met, which is unusual. They met in Beijing, which is extra unusual.
mhm,
And this came on the heels of BRICS expansion into the Gulf, SCO expansion with Iran becoming a full member.
mhm,
Um, there was the Raisi visit in February 2023. There was the Xi Jinping visit to Riyadh
mhm,
in December 22. All of these things came together and made it look like a big shift in China's role in the region. But for those of us who are here, or for those of us who are from here like you, what you've seen over the past few years is a real sense, I think, among different leaders, political leaders, business leaders, whatever, in the Gulf, that the instability in the region was really limiting a lot of what countries were
mhm,
trying to achieve. That instead of playing geopolitics, people should try to
mhm,
create opportunities for investment, for trade, for stability. And this coincided with a lot of, like you just said, a lot of dramatic events in Iran, which were
mhm,
stabilizing to the regime. All this, I think, came together to create the conditions for this rapprochement to occur. And
mhm,
you write about in the paper how different actors in Iraq and in Oman had been working with the Saudis and
mhm,
Iranians for over a year to lay
mhm,
the groundwork.
mhm.
But of course, it did happen in China, right? The final
Yeah.
signing did happen there. Um, why was that, do you think? Why did they, to my thinking, give the Chinese this gift to say, here's a very bold and important event that we're going to give to you without a lot of active diplomatic participation leading up to it?
Well, I think the most important reason is to have the support from China at these difficult situations for Iran. I mean, and also for Saudi side, it might be because of China's increasingly, I mean, getting engaged with the region, and also, as I said, because of Saudi's concerns about U.S. not supporting them maybe in the future. But for Iran, it's like, as I said, they just want to have a support of an external rising country and also you can see that in Persian, they always say, and on Khamenei's, for example, supreme leaders website, they always talk about China's rise, and especially during Raisi, because I've been comparing this to understand the perception. Sorry, because it's really raining here.
Yeah.
And yeah, and because they understand their perception of China's rise is totally changing compared to like Ahmadinejad or Rouhani. So that's why they want to have they know that they know that this is changing, and maybe because they want to have this support, and that's why they wanted to do this for China rhetorically, like supporting and bringing these two countries like for this reconciliation. This is my understanding. Maybe definitely there are other reasons as well.
Well, I like in your paper because again, like you do acknowledge that for the from the Iranian side, and you just talked about this a couple of minutes ago, that China was important, but it wasn't so directly important. It was the threat of losing the principal partner, the principal great power
Mhm,
partner. And
mhm,
the this is something I've written about a lot over the years. Like if you look at where China's interests are in the Middle East or in the Gulf, it's certainly much deeper on this side of the Gulf with the GCC countries, and that has to be concerning for Iranian
mhm.
leaders to think we have one
Yeah.
giant country that we can rely
Mhm,
on, and it looks like that
mhm,
giant country is shifting its priorities to our rivals.
mhm,
So, the way I think you described it here was that it was an indirect not involvement, like an indirect calculus that we might be losing China, so we have to do something dramatic to keep them on our
mhm.
side. So
Yeah, exactly. Mhm,
yeah. So just based on this, because I know it's late in the day in Australia, and you're a very busy student, so I'll try to wrap it up. But what are some of the misperceptions about this China, Saudi, Iran deal that you think need to be addressed? What are things that folks who are watching from say outside the region, what should they
mhm.
understand better about this um, trilateral agreement?
Well, maybe mm, I think it's not just saying, I mean, exaggerating on China's role. I think maybe this is the first misunderstanding. Um, what China is doing actually is, as the scholars argue, is giving like diplomatic weight to its initiatives, like for example, global security initiative they have. So it shouldn't be considered as something that China is really has actually this leverage in the region. I think, in my opinion, China still has it. It will take a long time, maybe in the future, to have this influence in the region. For example, for this current situation in the region, I don't see that China has this. I mean, the power and influence to solve this kind of conflicts now. So it's always better to think about clearly. I mean, considering the domestic environment and what is happening in the region itself, than just saying that okay, this is China and China was important. And also, the one other thing is that scholars also say a lot about China having the power and leverage on Iran, which is also not that true because, as I said, we have seen so many examples that Iran knows that when China actually is working with Iran, always considering the U.S. Their interest with the U.S. So in Iran, they already know that, and that's really important to think about, not just saying that China has really the leverage on Iran, and actually they can change Iran's behavior, but I don't think they can do it, not at this moment. Maybe just the only strategy Iran might take is, as I said, it's just denial, denying that what China is saying about Iran, and for example with UAE and the three islands, and that's the only thing Iran has been doing, and I think there's nothing more.
I agree completely. There's really a myth that China has this leverage in Iran, and one of the conversations I'll be having this week, we'll be talking with somebody about the perceptions within Iran of what they get from the relationship with China. And I know it's a very contentious issue.
Mhm.
There's in Iran right now, or sorry, in Tehran, there's this ongoing political problem for the mayor about this deal with China. for public transportation, and people are very frustrated with China's role in the economy. And
Mhm.
it's not like people in Iran have a very rosy image of the relationship with China, right? It's a very
No, no,
contentious
no, they
issue.
don't have it. No, I remember when the 25-year agreement happened, I was in Iran. It was a very difficult time for me as well because I was in the hospital with COVID. But I remember vividly that people were talking about this, like selling the country to China, and everyone was talking about it on social media. And there were songs about it. And like, this is really important that showed people's anger. And because of the history, we had in history a lot of these examples that happen, and people are really furious and they don't want this happen again. That's why they were really concerned with unknown information that they never shared clearly, and that's why people started having this showing this anger on social media and everywhere. So yeah, they don't have this positive outlook when it comes to Iran's relationship with China. And I can easily say that maybe 70% of people are like this in Iran. And everyone just, when you talk about China, and they always say, oh, no, low quality products of Chinese, we don't want this. And so it's like everyone talking about it. And maybe this is also an important point people outside Iran, they need to know.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for this. I think this paper really does a great job of helping people understand the complexities of this agreement and the agency of local actors and the tensions within the region that
Mm-hmm.
contributed to it. And I think you do a really good job of helping people understand that this wasn't necessarily, a Beijing directed agreement that China had a big
Mm-hmm.
role in, but rather an example of local diplomacy solving a local issue that China was asked to step in on. Niloufar,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to promote this article as widely as I can. I hope people read this. Um, One thing I found as an academic, of course, most of our writing gets stuck behind paywalls for terrible companies that make
Mm-hmm.
billions and billions of dollars. So I'm sure if people wrote to you and said, "Hey, would I be able to find a PDF someplace?" You might be able to direct them to you know, an email account or something where they maybe could find a way to read this article, because I really do think
Mm-hmm.
it should get a broader audience. And I look forward to your next publication. Good luck with the dissertation.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for having me. Thank you so much. Thanks for the support.
Of
I
course,
appreciate that.
of course. And I look forward to whatever comes next. Niloufar, thanks so much.
Thank you so much.